Welcome to the Beau Show. Sometimes I think we need a break from politics and news because it can be downright depressing, and that's bad for our well-being. So today, I want to focus on the idea of heroism. It's a subject I've covered musically through my compositions Blessed and Heart of Purple and Gold. In these songs, I try to take the listener on a journey of the concepts of courage, honor, and duty, and whether those are still alive and applicable today. I think they are, but sadly, they are harder to find as our country grapples with bitter polarization and tribalism. When I read the story of a 95-year-old Army veteran receiving the Bronze Star after all these years, it gave me some hope. Ubaldo Ciniero, otherwise known as Joseph, received the Bronze Star 75 years ago, but was never officially presented with the honor and medal until just about 2 weeks ago. On July 27th, U.S. Army Brigadier General Michael Leaney, Deputy Commander of the 40th Infantry Division in California, pinned the medal on Ciniero, and he said he was here to, quote, right a wrong. He presented the medal to Ciniero, which is one of the highest awards given for military combat, and in Ciniero's case, it was World War II. He stated, quote, Ciniero's exemplary performance of duty in active ground combat was in keeping with the finest traditions of military service and reflects great credit upon himself, his unit, and the Army of the United States, end quote. Ciniero's division of assignment landed in France in January of 1945 and took part in combat operations. They then entered the Netherlands, crossed the Rhine River, and advanced to the Harz Mountains. The division was recognized as a liberating unit by the U.S. Army's Center of Military History and the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in 1995 for the liberation of the Halberstadt-Zwieberge, a subcamp of the Buchenwald concentration camp, April 12th through 17th, 1945. Ciniero sailed back to the U.S. on September 5th, 1945, aboard the Queen Mary from Southampton, England. This ship is now docked 15 miles away from his current residence. Ciniero never spoke about the battle or the engagements he lived through, but he taught his children about lessons he learned. He was always open about things he learned in the Army, how it made him who he is today, and passing it to his family. His son Joel is who made the discovery that his dad had received this Bronze Star, having found his name on an 8th Infantry website, but then discovered that his father had never received the Bronze Star that he had been awarded. As a young boy, Ciniero never spoke about the war. Growing up with his father, Joel looked back in retrospect and couldn't compare what his father went through as a young man compared to where he was in his life at the time. Have a listen.
My whole life, he's just my dad. And I kind of today realize my dad is a hero. He never talks about the war. He talked about sort of the camaraderie. He talked about the Army, but we never heard about battles or engagements. He was, he's always very guarded about that. And I think because, combat was difficult for him. But because my dad never spoke much about the war, so I was interested in his division and what he did. And I found his name on an 8th Armored Infantry Division website. And I noticed that he had been awarded the Bronze Star. So I called naturally and I said, hey, you're at the Bronze Star. And he was like, no. I said, you did. But we never got the opportunity to have a ceremony, so that's kind of why we're here today.
He has awarded the Bronze Star Medal to Private First Class Ubaldo Ciniero, 7th Armored Infantry Battalion.
As your young boy or grown up to be a man, he's just your dad. But in retrospect, when we look back and understand what he did when he was a young man, it's like, wow. I got to tell you, it sets you down for a minute, makes you think. So for sure, my dad is my hero.
Joel further said, even when we are out and he's wearing his World War II veteran hat, and people say, thank you for your service, the issue for him is he's grateful, but he really thinks the thanks goes to all his friends that didn't come back from the war. Now, I've been fortunate enough to see these types of medal return ceremonies, just like this one, as a result of singing for the nonprofit Purple Hearts Reunited, which sprung from the plethora of Purple Heart medals that were discovered either having been lost, some of them are found in estate sales, or in some cases they were stolen. These ceremonies are very unique and special because they tell a valuable and inspirational story, just like Joseph Ciniero's. And although he's 95, it wasn't too late to recognize his honor and service. And I think Joseph's reaction is a common one in terms of how he reacts when people thank him for his service. He made it back, but many of his friends did not, and their sacrifice should be revered and remembered. For those soldiers, it was never about the merit or the glory. It was an act of service, of selflessness, of sacrifice. And I think about what his son said as well, that it's so relevant, that he could not possibly imagine his dad's life and what he went through compared to his own life at the same age. It's night and day difference. But doesn't that speak to how far we have come as a nation, and also the comforts afforded to us in life that have exponentially increased in just one generation? That's what sacrifice is. It is compromising our own comfort or rewards so that our children and our grandchildren can have a better life. I heard the exact same words come out of Maximo Alvarez's mouth when he talked about his father, persecuted in Cuba, who was able to see his son step on American soil and become an American. Take a look.
Because it's the most generous country in the world, and I do get emotional when you ask me that, because I still hear my dad. And I remember he used to tell us how lucky he was, because he was able to leave Spain, running away from communism into Cuba. And when he was about to enjoy the fruit of his labor, from one day to the next, he lost it all. And then 3.5 years later, he's able to come over here. And even though he wasn't worth very much financially, I can tell you, he was a very wealthy man when he died, simply because he saw his son not only graduate from college, but start a profitable business, an impact over people.
But with each generation, and with the additional comfort that we have, we can also lose a sense of the gratitude. Because right now, millennials and Gen Z do not really understand the concept of true sacrifice. Now, the pandemic certainly made us lose some amount of freedom. But in terms of losing TikTok, social media, no, that has not happened. I won't deny that many had a tough time in the pandemic, no doubt about that. But compared to food rationing and the daily slog of World War II, we live in extraordinary times. And if it weren't for Joseph Ciniero, we might all be speaking German and still under dictatorship rule. That's why the sacrifice is so important. And these are humanitarian issues, matters of the heart. That's where America has always been a leader. Compassion and sacrifice. We fought the British and we won. We fought the Third Reich and we won. We still fight enemies, and for the most part, although warfare is quite different, we still win. Even in the Olympics, we pretty much smoked the Chinese, and that's no easy feat. We showed our dominance. The idea that America should become like every other nation is a dangerous one. We don't need to be like anyone else. We need to be us. That means leading. China is without question our biggest foe and has an actual plan to overtake us in every manner. Do we have a plan? We don't engage in traditional military conflict like Joseph Ciniero experienced. Today it's more highly specialized. And the Chinese have found creative ways to infiltrate our society, our technology, and most recently, our lungs. So heroism need not have an age. Whether you're 25 or you're 95, you can still make an impact. Joseph Ciniero was finally awarded for bravery in combat 75 years ago. But did he complain that he never got his Bronze Star? No. He raised his kids, taught them what lessons he learned from being in the Army, and passed those down. And that brings up another element of this, tradition. Tradition is important. It allows stories like Private Ciniero's to be told. You won't see it in many headlines, though. Well, it does on the Epoch Times, because the journalists value truth and tradition. And why do they do this? Because they know that China destroys tradition. There's no valor or merit there. There's no morality. We have to use our freedom of speech to ensure that truth and tradition remain in our eyes and ears. We have to teach heroism, nobility, right and wrong, and how to treat our fellow man. And with no disrespect intended to our European partners, many of whom fought alongside us, we are not them. We are America, and we must conduct ourselves as such. There are massive shoes to fill, but we should also not let freedom blind us to evils that lurk both within and outside of our borders. Those who want to defeat freedom, and these people have intricate plans to do so. We are seeing this play out right now before our very eyes. I will stay away from politics at the moment because this show is one of inspiration. The politics have become so divisive that it puts our freedom in a vulnerable place. The Constitution begins, "We the people," not "we the government" or "we the CDC" or anything else. It's the people that matter. We decide. That band of rebels in 1776 had had enough of King George. And so they, the people, decided that it was worth fighting for. When I interviewed a number of veterans for my video, Blessed, they had some very inspirational things to say. Take a look.
My fondest memory of World War II was the day when victory was declared over the Axis.
A good American cannot live without freedom. It's worth fighting for.
I have the opportunity here in the United States of America to be what we want to be.
I've been several countries all over the world, and there's nowhere in the world like it is here in this country.
Freedom is not just a concept. I think it's a way to live, and it's something we can give.
It's always been a family tradition in my family, and just to be a representative of the best country the world has ever known is my true blessing.
We've got guys who served in Pennsylvania, New York, Kentucky, Tennessee, and they come together and become one of the greatest fighting forces that's ever existed. And you wouldn't have had those friends, but they will lay down their life for you.
To me, they say it all. They have fought in conflicts from World War II to Iraq and Afghanistan. But what if we aren't in the military? Are we able to translate these noble concepts and values to others? Absolutely. Think about what Joel Ciniero said about his dad and how he passed on the things he learned to him. That's the key. Passing it on, paying it forward, living as examples for others to emulate. Our culture has become warped, and it didn't happen overnight. It's up to us to revive it, to renew it, to regain it. And that means understanding that heroism has no age. We can be inspired by first responders, teachers, our military, and others, but ultimately, we have to place the responsibility on our shoulders as well. We live in incredibly comfortable times, even with the pandemic. Compare us now to the Great Depression or the 1800s. Life was not easy then. But if we ignore the sacrifice, if we shirk the responsibility, then we lose what we had and what others fought so desperately to preserve. We have to be the sustainers. We have to share the burden of freedom in addition to reaping its reward. What Joseph Ciniero did was certainly heroic and inspirational, but you can tell by his humility that he probably doesn't think what he did was all that great, because so many soldiers he knew did not make the journey back home. There's a certain brotherhood and fraternity that comes with being in our military, and I wish that we all as Americans had that same level of fraternity, that our shared values and principles were to be revered. But all too often, I see our values getting eroded and warped. Even if we fail, we should be valiant in the attempt. We can be the happy warriors. Recall the Gadsden flag. It's a coiled rattlesnake that reads, "Don't tread on me." We have to live with that type of attitude. We enjoy the fruits of freedom, but don't tread on it. The snake will bite. To be inspirational is to be human, even if the act itself seems superhuman. We all bleed red. And when I think of how philanthropic we are as Americans, it makes me realize that inspiration can happen at any time and any place, should we choose to pursue it. How, when, and where it happens is really up to us. Remember JFK's famous line, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country"? We can do a lot for our country just by being exemplary and inspirational. But that also means defending America, not just in the military sense, but in the idealistic sense. The idea of America, the shining city on the hill. There's a lot at stake and a lot to defend. You don't have to look too far outside of our borders and shores to see examples of nations who cannot sustain themselves, where freedom is a foreign concept. It's sadly the plight of Cuba, Venezuela, and Iran. And those people there cry out for what we have. Can you now understand the responsibility we have as Americans to lead and to be the example to follow? It is worthy and it is noble to pursue such a path. Do you know anyone that deserves a Bronze Star in life? If you don't, do you think you could live a life worthy of the merit of a Bronze Star? It may not be through the valor of combat, but could it be through the valor of values? Could it be that you led a life worthy of emulation? In my view, inspiration comes through aspiration. Once you aspire to something and you set your sights, you have already created the stakes. If that pursuit is a noble one, like defending America, then you will automatically be an inspiration to others. And it doesn't have to inspire a whole bunch of people. It could be just one. It could be your child, a friend, a colleague. Trust me, someone is watching. In an interview that I did for Thrive Global not long ago, I created something called the 5 L's. Listen, learn, love, liberate, and lead. These are things I kind of came up with to figure out how to have a life that had aim to it. We can all be better listeners and always learn something each day. We can always love better and more often. But we also should liberate our minds from the clutter and the things that derail us and divide us. And then finally, lead. To lead is to actually make a personal decision, a first step, if you will. I've been in many situations where I was at an impasse. I may have had to take the road less traveled by, the tougher course. It might come with consequences, but I had to take the high road as much as I wanted to stoop. When I think of veterans like Joseph Ciniero, most of us do not know the difficulty of his life and of his military experience fighting in World War II. And then when we fast forward to today, what are we willing to give or even give up as Americans? What are our stakes? Are we as humble as Joseph Ciniero? Or do we just want the praise and the prize? Are we willing to defend America and what she represents to the world? I think it's amazing that Joseph Ciniero's son was able to look into his father's history and find out about his military valor and the Bronze Star. In that respect, he honored him. Everyone has a story. And I think about the musical lines from the Broadway show Hamilton. Who lives, who dies, who tells your story? How do we tell our story? I think we tell it by living it and telling it ourselves. We get to determine our legacy by what we are doing right now. And life is brief. We don't know when our time is up. So it's high time we got it together. We had the Great Enlightenment, and now we have the Great Wokement? We can do much better than that. Let's give ourselves a challenge and not live in the bliss of oblivion. Remember that line from Shawshank Redemption? Busy living. Get busy living or get busy dying. That's about right. And even that great line from Gladiator, what we do in life echoes in eternity.
Echoes in eternity.
You are the inspiration if you choose to be. Joseph Ciniero chose, and now he's passed the torch. You can be that too. We are right in the thick of summer right now, and if you're about 40 years old, you've got only, 40 more summers to go? How will you spend those summers? Hopefully they won't be locked down summers. But what we are choosing today will dictate that future as individuals and as Americans. Never let the loud bark of a few stark raving mad people dictate your thoughts and your actions. They are not the inspirational. They are the devastational. They are the delusional, the underminers, those who will strip you of freedom. This is the challenge I pose to you. And I think we should be inspired by a 95-year-old Army veteran who got up out of his wheelchair to salute and to receive the Bronze Star. Don't let his effort be in vain. Don't let his sacrifice go to waste. Let his story lead you to aspire and inspire. I'm Beau, and that's the show.